So, on the recommendation from one of our members, she saw me somewhere out about, was pleasantly surprised that I was reading a book. And then I explained to her I actually read 3 to 4 books, or what I call treasure maps, a month. And she recommended that I start sharing the books I read. I actually gave somebody, one of our clients, a book to borrow today from our bookshelf. So, these are some things I would like to share with you. So I've read this book many times, Mastery. It's one of my favorite. And I have these 2 books here because, first of all, one of my favorite authors, and then conscious coaching. I've actually spent some time and had a conversation with Brett in Indianapolis. Amazing coach. I've been saying for years that it's about the emotions, and the other stuff is just extra. And so why is this super important? I'll give you a little story. So there's a story in Mastery about a doctor. He worked in a clinic. I believe his name was Seaman House. And very interesting. This is a long time ago. And he was trying to figure out why, when the doctors or the students were giving birth to kids, that the mortality rate, I promise there's a happy ending to this, why the maternity rate, those still deaths would be 5 times as much than when the midwives would be doing the giving the birth. So let me put that 2 examples. One, delivering babies were the doctors and the students, and then group 2 was just the midwives. And there was 5 times as many deaths when the doctors and the students were delivering the babies. And this guy, Simon House, he was trying to figure out why the hell this was going on. He did a bunch of studies, he ruled out a bunch of things, and then lo and behold, he crunched the numbers, and it was crystal clear what was happening. This is way back in the day. The doctors and the students they were delivering babies on the same gurney that they were doing autopsies. Not only that, the doctors and students would perform an autopsy, and then without washing their hands, they would proceed to help give birth to the baby. And 5 times as many kids passed away when they did this. But when he studied the midwives who only delivered babies, they didn't have their hands compromised from the autopsies. There was 5 times less as deaths. So he figured this out. It was crystal clear to him. And he went about starting to tell doctors, hey, whenever you do an autopsy and you don't wash your hands, you 2 students, that is the reason why these kids are having a stillbirth. And the doctors and students were in shock. They couldn't believe this. They were angry. They were upset. And he kept trying to tell people, please listen. I've done the numbers. It's without a doubt, scientifically, more deaths are happening because you are doing autopsies and not washing your hands, and the midwives are washing their hands. And long story short, they put him into a mental institution. He went insane. Not only that, they put him in there because they could not believe that he would blame doctors for this death. Why am I telling you this long story? It's because of the second book I'm reading and the conversation I had with Brett in Indianapolis. I figured out that this guy was put in the mental institution because he didn't know how to communicate with people. Everything he's saying was right. But I've run into coaches that are technically great, but they're just assholes. And this guy meant well, but he did not know how to communicate with these doctors and students. He didn't seek first to understand them, how they ticked, what their purpose was. And his lack of having a conscious communication put him in a mental institution. They forced him in there. And why something like this is so important, because like Ernest Hemingway, he says, we're all apprentices in a field where we can never become a master. I'm always figuring out what do I need to read to become a better coach and leader. And conscious coaching is all about emotional intelligence. There's going to be times where you're going to have a workout program, but you had 2 hours of sleep and you had a fight with a loved one, or your kid was up all night. And I like to think we're emotionally aware, conscious coaches, that we can adjust that program. Or there might be days, times where you need that push because you just need it. And this is all about one of our biggest values is, I learned this from my mentor, is first seek to understand, then to be understood. And I feel this is what we do better than any coaches in Pacifica. And it's the ability to know what our members' purpose is, what makes them tick, and then understand how they communicate and do our very best to match what they need in alignment to their purpose, how they want to be communicated to, and as corny as it sounds, deposit emotional currency into their bank account. I feel this is what separates Terra Nova Fitness coaches from all the rest. It is valuing our members like they matter and like we give a shit. So, one of my favorites, Mastery, I've read it maybe 10 times. And Conscious Coaching, I had the pleasure of speaking with Brett, and it's a really good book. And it helps us understand why some of you communicate in one way versus another and what makes you tick. So I'd actually love to see what any of you are reading too as well, because I'm curious and interested about you guys too as well.